Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. Om Akhandananda Sambodha Vandanatyasya Jayate Govindam Tamaham Vande Chidananda Tanum Gurum. So yesterday we were seeing yada asti upādhihi tada bhinna atma tada sajatiya iva abhati. Swapnarthavat tasya mrishatmakatvat tad apratito svayaṃ eva atma brahma ekatam eti. पृथक् न भाति ततः सजातीकृतो भेदः न भिग्भेदः. So yesterday we said when there is upādhi, yada asti upādhi, when there is upādhi embodiment, the limiting adjunct, when there is this embodiment or limiting adjunct, then that abhinna atma, the atma, that which identifies itself with that embodiment, the atma which does not differentiate itself from the embodiment because of ignorance, tada sajati vabhati. Then because of that identification with the body sense organ complex, the adjunct, the limitations, the embodiments, we see the duality as though existing. So duality of same class. So we negated the duality of different class. No, we duality of same class. How can there be duality of the same class, that too? Because it is there, that is why we are experiencing, right? Otherwise, how can we experience that which does not exist? Okay, I understand. There is one rope and one snake. But I am seeing multiplicity here. For that, swapnarthavat, we are giving example. Swapnarthavat, this is not one is to one. This is one is to many. How? In the dream, the one who is the experiencer and the one who gives the experience and the environment all are imagined by one person. The environment is not real, that is his imagination. The one who gives the experience also is not real. Okay, at least the experiencer, that experiencer also is not real, because that is not real experience. When you wake up from the dream, you don't have the same effect as you had in the dream, whether it's good or bad. There's no same effect there. So once you wake up, you get rid of that experience. So swapnarthavat, in swapna, in dream, everything, the environment, the experiencer and the experienced, they are all different. Therefore, tasya mrishatmakatva, they are all illusory. The objects which we experience and the objects which we see in the dream, they are both similar, therefore they are illusory both. Tad apratitau. Then the embodiment is not perceived. When the embodiment is not perceived, when it is resolved, when there is no identification with the embodiment, then svayaṃ atma brahma ekatam eti. The atma, the individual self, but himself attains the absolute self. Eti ina gato, attains, he gains the absolute self. Prithak nabhati, he does not shine as separate individual from us, as something different from the self, absolute self. Tathā sajati krito bhedaḥ na. Therefore, there is no duality of same class. I understood everything, but I don't understand that. What is that? Brahma ekatam eti. He gains identity with the absolute self. He becomes one with the absolute self. He attains absolute self. What is the problem? If he becomes one with or attains that, then there is a duality where I from here attain that there. So that kind of duality, there is always there. One who is limited here becomes one there. So there is here and there duality. So to remove that, we are bringing an example. ghaṭābhāve ghaṭākāśo mahākāśo yathā tathā upādhyabhāve tvātmaiṣa svayaṃ brahmaiva kevalam. So the contention, the doubt, the place of contention for the doubt is Atma Brahma Ekatam Eti. The Atma attains identity, oneness with the Absolute. Now, how is it possible? So he says, ghaṭābhāve ghaṭākāśah mahākāśah yathā tathā upādhyabhāve tu atma esha svayaṃ brahmaiva kevalam. So he says, yathā, like ghaṭābhāve ghaṭākāśa, when there is absence of the pot, the embodiment called pot, the limiting agent called pot. ghaṭākāśah mahākāśah, the pot space becomes the absolute space. There is space. There is a pot. In the pot, there is space. Thus, the space inside the pot is given the name pot space. So, the space inside the room is called as room space, mahākāśo. Okay. So, pot space, room space, etc. are pot, room, etc. are limiting agents which are separating the space. When the pot and the room is destroyed, the separated space becomes one with the absolute space. Right? Similarly, tathā upādhyabhāve, when there is absence of embodiment of the body sense organ complex, then too definitely yesha atma, this individual, this self, svayaṃ brahmaiva kevalam, it is absolute self alone. There is no duality. It does not gain the absolute self. It is absolute self itself alone. I don't understand. The spot space merges with the absolute self. So you mean to say this jivatma merges with the paramatma? No, I didn't say anything like that. I made it very clear because this is a stupid idea of this yogis, where the yogas interprets the idea of jivatma merging in the paramatma, union. I told you. There is no union, there is no merging here. And what we say is the idea of the space limited by pot, etc., the pot space, room space, etc., itself is illusory. It's stupidity. How do you say that? He is explaining that. pūrṇa eva sadākāśah ghaṭe satyapyasatyapi nityapūrṇasya nabhaso vicchedaḥ sidhyati. He is making it very clear. How can the space be one? How can the self be one? Always. So he says, with the example and example, he is establishing the example. pūrṇa eva sadākāśah ghaṭe satyapi asatyapi nityapūrṇasya nabhaso vicchedaḥ sidhyati. Ghaṭe satyapi asatyapi, whether the pot exists or does not exist, really does not matter. Akāśa sadā pūrṇa eva. The akāśa, the space, ether, is always absolute. Whether the pot exists or does not exist. How can you say? You just said pot space, room space, etc. We'll come to that. Nityapūrṇasya nabhaso, the space which is nityapūrṇa. In the Shruti it says ākāśavat sarvagatascha nityah. Akāśa is accepted to be sarvagata and nitya. Sarvagata means all pervasive, nitya means eternal. The logicians accept the space to be ekam nityam vibhu, one, eternal and all pervading. And the Veda says also whatever is all pervasive is one. So Vedas also seem to say the same thing, like the logicians. No, the Veda don't establish the same thing as logicians, because the logicians accept the space to be eternally eternal, but for the Vedantins it is a effect, karyatvat anityam. Yat kritakam tad anityam. Whatever is creation, whatever is created, whatever is a product effect, that is non-eternal for us. Then why is the Shruti saying Akāśavat sarvagata nitya? Why is this Shruti establishing the self to be nitya, eternal, the space to be eternal? The eternality is of two types, two kinds. One is a eternally eternal, and the other is what? We call eternally eternal means nirapeksha nityatvam, which is a eternal without any association with anything. The second is sapekshika nityatvam, eternal with respect to something. So, with respect to and without respect to anything, the self is eternal. With respect to something, the space is eternal. Like we say, the ants will talk about us. The ants or the housefly, it will talk about us. Oh, this fellow is eternal. Are we eternal? No, because it's hundred thousands of generations sees us. So it seems that we are eternal for them. We are eternal for them. Yes, true. That is sapekshika nityatvam. Comparatively, we are eternal. So, comparative eternal and non-comparative eternality. That is what is the two eternities. So, when the Shruti says eternal, then it is comparative eternal. With reference to something, we call this space to be eternal. That's all. Okay. So, pūrṇa eva. Akasha is always absolute and eternal. Now, nabhaso, that eternal and absolute space, kena viccheda sidhyati, by what can you divide it? By what can you split it? Viccheda means split it, tear it. You cannot separate you cannot divide the space with anything. The idea of division of space, etc., is a stupidity. I don't understand what you mean by that. We'll explain that also. Acchinnaśchinnavadbhāti, pāmarāṇāṃ ghaṭādinā, grāmakṣetrādyavadhibhirbhinneva vasudhā yathā. Acchinnaśchinnavadbhāti, pāmarāṇāṃ ghaṭādinā, grāmakṣetrādyavadhibhirbhinneva vasudhā yathā. Yathā vasudhā, like vasudha means yath, vasudhaika kutumbakam. Vasudhaika kutumbakam means vasudha eka kutumbakam. This earth is one family. The whole earth, this whole creation is one family, not vasudeva kutumbakam. We are not saying we are all sons of Vasudeva or one family belonging to Vasudeva. Vasudha, not Vasudha. Okay. So vasudha grāmakṣetrādyavadhibhirbhinneva. See, this is my land and that is another person's land. Is there a demarcation? No. We have to demark using tape and all that. Otherwise, there is no demarcation. Earlier, it was one land. Then we separated your land, my land, and all that. Okay, there is no really demarcation. Later, we construct a fence and walls, limit ourselves from them. Similarly, you see a village, this village and that village. The village ends here and that village starts there. In fact, there is no limitation where that village starts and where this village ends. Similarly, between two states, we don't know where that state or that city starts and that which city ends. We understand this is the limit. And between two countries, there is no line of actual control, line of control, etc. They say LOC, LAC, etc. But really, there is no line there. We have an imaginary line. Later, we need to, because of the infiltrators, etc., we need to construct walls and fences and whatnot. Really, there is no line. But there is an imaginary line which is accepted. Or in the multi-story buildings, a person who is buying the from second store, whatever it is, from second floor, whatever floor we are talking about, 15th floor, let us say. The person who is buying the house in 15th floor is not buying anything actually. He is buying the space in that area. That's all. There was nothing. He constructed walls and a ceiling. He calls that a house. And that is what we own. We don't even own the land. We don't even own the land. So he says, brahmaiva. It is seen as though it is different. Similarly, tathā, yathā, tathā. Achinnaha. Chinnaha, achinnaha. Chinnaha, separated, limited. Achinnaha, not separated, not separated, not limited. Pāmarāṇāṃ ghaṭādinā, pāmarāṇāṃ chinnavadbhāti. Acchinnaha. What is acchinnaha? What is not separated? The space, the ether, the space which is not separated by anything. By the illiterates, pāmarāṇāṃ, by the illiterates, ghaṭādinā chinnavadbhāti. It is seen as though it is separated by pot, etc. Pot, room, etc. It is separated. That is how the illiterate people see. In reality, there is no separation. So, example is explained through another example. Okay. Now, example exemplified. Now, we took the example, they explained the example and gave it another example. Now, we come back to the exemplified. tathaiva paramaṃ brahma mahatāṃ cha mahattamam paricchinnamivābhāti bhrāntyā kalpitavastunā. tathā eva paramaṃ brahma mahatāṃ cha mahattamam paricchinnamivābhāti bhrāntyā kalpitavastunā. tathā eva. Similarly, the example is atma brahmatam eti. This individual self gains the absolute self, attains the absolute self. That exemplified is taken here. Tathaiva. Similarly, mahattāṃ mahattamam, that which is bigger than the biggest. Mahatāṃ, biggest than the bigger. Let us state. Mahattamam means biggest. Mahat means big. That which is biggest than the big, whatever you call, accept as big. He should have said bigger than the biggest, bigger than the big. He didn't say bigger than the big. He said biggest than the big. Why is that? Because the idea of bigness is comparative. When you say, oh, big means, is it bigger than this house? Yes. Big than that mountain? Yes. Big than Himalayas? Yes. So, you bring in different ideas of comparatives. So, to refute all that, he says biggest, mahattamam, biggest, superlative degree. So, big, whatever you accept, that beyond that, it is biggest. Okay. Now, how can that be? This is based on the Shruti statement, anoraniyan mahato mahiyan yathā, that which is smaller than the smallest and bigger than the biggest. How can the self be smaller than the smallest and bigger than the biggest? How can it be smaller than the small? The smallest one is atom. Okay, quack or whatever you call it. That smallest one. In Shastra, we call it paramaṃ, atom, anu. So, inside that atom, there is existence. For that atom to exist, you have to have the existence inside. So, therefore, that is smaller than the smallest. What is biggest? This space, ether. So, for the space to exist, the self needs to be bigger than that to provide that existence to it. So, it gives the existence by staying inside the cell. It is giving existence by staying above the self, beyond the self, beyond the space. Okay. So, mahatāṃ mahiyan. What is that? Paramaṃ brahma. This absolute self is greatest than the great. Then how do I say the difference? How do I see the difference? Bhrāntyā kalpitavastunā paricchinnamivābhāti. Bhrāntyā, because of the erroneous knowledge, because of the ignorance. Kalpitavastunā, because of the ignorance, vastu, object. Vastu means object or self. Here, vastu means object. The object, kalpita, which is imagined. Which is imagined means kalpita means imagined. Imagined means superimposed. Because of the superimposed objects. Because of the superimposed objects. Which is because of the ignorance, erroneous knowledge. Paricchinnamivābhāti. It seems the paramaṃ brahma, the absolute self, seems eva parichinnam eva, as though it is limited. It is abhati means seems. It seems to be as though limited. Okay. Really, there is no limitation. So we come to the conclusion. Tasmāt, when you say tasmāt, therefore we conclude it. Tasmādbrahmātmanorbhedaḥ kalpita natu vāstavah. Tasmādbrahmātmanorbhedaḥ kalpitah natu vāstavah. Therefore, the duality, the duality between Brahma and Atma, the absolute self and the individual self, is a kalpitah, superimposed. Natu vāstava is not true. It's not real. It is only an imagination. Okay. So, now, he says, tathaiva muhushrutya apyekatvam pratipādyate brahmātmano tattvam asi ityadvayatto vattaye. Tathaiva muhuhu shrutya api ekatvam pratipādyate brahmātmanoho tattvam asi iti advayato vattaye. Tathaiva, that is why Shrutya api, even the Shruti too, establish Advaita Upataye, to establish the non-duality, Advayatva, to establish the non-dualityness, non-dualness. Muhu, again and again, Tattvamasi iti. Through Tattvamasi, Tattvamasi, you are that, that you are. You are that. By stating the you are that again and again, what does that mean? First, we'll have to understand the muhu again. Again and again means in the statement, the Shruti, Tattvamasi is repeated 9 times. Shvetaketu, the sun, comes from the school, college, whatever that is, school. He comes from the school after completing the schooling, Vedic studies. He comes back to his house. And he is a very intelligent kid. Therefore, he has that ego of intelligence, smartness. So his father identifies that. Therefore, he understands that this fellow has not given up his ego. Therefore, he has not understood the self. So he asks him, did you study everything? He says, of course, yes. Did you study that which needs to be studied? Of course. I'm a very pet disciple of my Guruji. Because he is a good student, he is a very intelligent student. Every guru, whether he teaches science, arts, or Vedanta, he loves an intelligent student. He gives special care to that intelligent student. A student, intelligent means a student who understands, who desires to understand. That is what intelligence here says. Okay. So he says, okay, did you ask your guru? Now, Shvetaketu, because he is an intelligent fellow, he says, okay, father knows something which probably I didn't learn because I didn't ask. Janatopi medhavi jadavat lokamachareta. Na prashtam kasyachit bruyat. Don't answer without being questioned. So, he understands, father knows something. Therefore, let me ask him. So, he says, please teach me. Then, father teaches the son 9 times. Tattvamasi Shvetaketu. He takes one seed of one fruit of the banyan tree and says, in this banyan tree, break it, you see a small seed. This small seed has a potency of becoming this big banyan tree and producing so many banyan trees. Okay. Then he asks him to bring a lump of salt. He mixes it in water. Now he says, can you differentiate the salt? Top, above, below, and middle. Everywhere there is only salt. So like that. So it gives 9 different examples and establishes that a self is you. You are the self. Tattvamasi Shvetaketu completes it with Tattvamasi. This is Muhu, meaning 1. Meaning 2 is Tattvamasi is called Mahavakya. Mahavakya means Jiva Brahma Abheda Bodhaka Vakyam Mahavakyam. Mahavakya means the statement which establishes the identity between the individual self and the absolute self. The statement that establishes the identity between the individual self and the absolute self is Mahavakya. Like that, there are Mahavakyas. This Tattvamasi is not the only Mahavakya. So for people who understand Vedanta a little bit, when you ask, how do you know Mahavakyas? Yes, I know Tattvamasi, Aham Brahmasmi, etc. How many Mahavakyas are there? 4. They immediately say the wrong answer, 4. Because though it may seem to be right, it is not right. Because the 4 Mahavakyas are not limited to 4. We are taking only 4 Mahavakyas as example. For a whole pot of rice, one rice is good enough to test if it is cooked or not. Similarly, for the whole of Veda, one Mahavakya is taken. So we have 4 Vedas, so 4 Mahavakyas. That is how we gain 4 Mahavakyas. Otherwise, even in one single Upanishad, there can be more than one Mahavakya. Every Upanishad, if it has to qualify to be a Upanishad, it has to have a Mahavakya. It has to establish the identity between the individual self and absolute self. There is no other way. Okay, now, so since there are many Mahavakyas, muhuhu, again and again. Do you understand? So, iti, with these Mahavakyas, brahmātmanoh ekatvam pratipādyate. The Shruti establishes, the Shruti too establishes again and again the identity between the individual self and absolute self through tathaiva, etc. Mahavakyas. Okay. What is Tat? Tat is that. That means Ishvara. Okay. What is Tvam? Tvam means you. You means Jiva, individual self. Asi, isness. R is, you is self. You is Ishvara. You are Ishvara. That is what it is. Okay. So you mean to say that I am Ishvara? You are Ishvara? Can you create an ant? We already went through this stupid logic. We are not establishing that you are the Ishvara directly, but we have recourse to some other method. What is that? So he says, pratyakshādi virodhena vakyayoho navpadyate tattvam padarthayoho aikyam lakshayoreva sidhyati. When you yourself can understand that I cannot be the Ishvara, Ishvara and I cannot be one. When you yourself can understand it with your limited intelligence, Veda, the word comes from Vida Jnani, knowledge. So Veda is ocean of knowledge. Will it not understand? He definitely knows that. So therefore, he says, pratyakshādi virodhena bhakyayoho nopapadyate tattam padarthayoho aikyam lakshayoho eva sidhyati. Pratyakshādi virodhena. Because of the contradiction with respect to the direct perception, etc., I cannot be the Ishvara. We know that. So there is directly contradiction through pratyaksha. He creates, he is creator, and I am creator. There cannot be any identity possible. So vakyo tattam padarthayoho vakyoho, the statements of tat and tvam, etc. Aikyam navapadyate. The identity cannot come through the vachyayoho, through the vachya, not vakyayoho, vachyayoho. Vachya means the word meaning. First, we'll understand the word. A word has two kinds of meaning. There are two possibilities for a meaning in a word. One is a word meaning, the other is implied meaning. Word meaning, vachyartha, implied meaning, lakshyartha. Vachyartha and lakshyartha, word meaning and implied meaning. What does it mean? When I say pot, you understand the object pot. Okay? So, when I say this person is tiger, I don't mean that he is tiger, but I mean he is sharp as tiger. When I say this person is a dog, I don't mean that that person is dog, but that person has the loyalty like a dog. Okay. Similarly, when we take this simple word pot, when I say pot, I mean a vase. But a person with a crooked intellect will think, pot, oh, why is Guruji talking about pot? So we are talking about a simple word meaning. Pot means vase, that which holds water. But in implied meaning, the same word pot implies something else. A drug. Smoking a drug. Right? So he says vachyoho tattvam padarthyo. Between the tat and tvam, the words, the word meaning cannot be possible. Now upādhyate aikyam. The identity of the words tat and tvam through the word meaning is not possible. Then lakshyoho eva sidhyati. Only through the implied meaning it is possible. There is word meaning. There is word implied meaning. So a word pot means vase. A word pot means vase is a word meaning, direct meaning. A word pot means drug is implied meaning. Okay, so word meaning and implied meaning. We'll understand the implied meaning in detail. We'll see that. Om pūrṇamadah pūrṇamidam pūrṇāt pūrṇasya pūrṇamādāya pūrṇameva vashishyate. Om shanti shanti shanti.